Okay, so there's this new investment opportunity that's just blowing up on social media in Zimbabwe. It's all about the pork industry, and it's promising some seriously high returns. You've probably seen it. The marketing's gone viral. It's got a super charismatic leader, a really powerful message about community. But whenever there's this much excitement, that's exactly when we need to step back and do our homework. So let's dive into the Kalos Meats partnership and really break down the red flags that any potential investor needs to be looking at.
And here it is. This is the big hook. $5 a kilo for pork. And get this, free delivery in Harare. I mean, that's a price that just grabs your attention, right? It's no wonder it's pulled in so many partners, a lot of them from the diaspora. It's so simple, so powerful. You could say it's pretty much the engine driving this whole thing.
And the marketing, it's built on this really powerful, almost spiritual idea. We are blessed to bless. You see, it's all about community empowerment, shared prosperity. They're not just selling an investment, they're selling the idea of joining a family, a movement. And that emotional pull is a huge, huge part of why it's so appealing. But, and this is a big but, as we're about to find out, the world of emotions and the world of investment contracts, well, they don't always speak the same language.
All right, so we've got the promise down. Now let's talk about the paperwork. This is where we need to switch gears, Go from being an excited supporter to a really careful investigator, especially with something as complex as farming. It really is all about asking those tough questions before any money leaves your pocket.
This really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? On one side, you've got the pitch. It's all about high returns, joining the family, the viral success. It's exciting. But then, on the other side, you have the cold, hard questions of an investor. Where's the prospectus? What does the actual legal contract say? Have the financials been audited? And the big one, who really holds the title to the assets? It's this gap, this space between the promise and the paperwork that we're going to dig into right now.
Okay, first up, red flag number 1, the gap between rhetoric and reality. Look, when the sales pitch is way louder than the actual contract, that's when you've got to lean in and listen really closely. This whole thing has a name. It's called informal disclosure. Basically, it's when all the important details of an investment are coming from marketing, from social media, from verbal promises, instead of from a formal, legally binding contract. And any expert will tell you, for a partnership like this to work, the terms have got to be crystal clear and in writing. Anything else, it's like trying to build a house on sand. And here's why that's so dangerous. With no formal contract, the terms can literally change overnight. A promise made in a marketing video, good luck trying to enforce that in court. You're not investing in a solid business structure, you're investing in a person's brand. And that leaves all these massive questions about who's responsible for what just hanging in the air. The bottom line is simple, right? A promise you see on social media is not a clause in a contract.
All right, on to our second red flag, and you'll see how this ties right back into that lack of paperwork. We're talking about the business model itself, which just seems, well, incredibly brittle, and all the enthusiasm in the world can't change the basic, hard math of farming.
So here's the core problem. They're promising to sell pork at a fixed price, that $5 a kilo, but the cost of producing that pork, it's all over the place. I'm talking about things like global feed prices, fuel costs, they're constantly changing. Just take a look at this. The biggest cost by far in pig farming is feed. We're talking a huge chunk, like 60 to 70% of all expenses. So that little sliver at the top, the part that's supposed to be for partner returns and profit, it is super, super sensitive to any little change in the price of things like maize or soy. And this little table just lays it all out. Look, in scenario A, if costs stay stable, you've got a 50-cent margin. Yeah, it's thin, but it works. But now look at scenario B, a pretty small 15% jump in feed costs, which is totally possible, by the way, and poof, the entire margin is gone. The whole thing goes into the red. So the big question is, if that happens, where does the money to pay the partners actually come from?
And that leads us right into our third red flag. And honestly, this might be the most important one of all for anyone thinking about putting their hard-earned cash into this. It's a simple question. What exactly are you buying? Think about it like this. Are you funding an asset, or are you just paying for an expense? When you hand over your money, is it going towards building something permanent that you could actually own, like a pigsty, or is it just covering a temporary cost you'll never see again, like pig feed? The difference between those two things, legally and financially, is absolutely massive. It all boils down to one word: ownership. Or, as the lawyers say, title. So if your money is supposed to build a pigsty, do you legally own it? Is your name on any document? If things go south, can you sell it? If the answer to those questions is no, and your money is just buying feed, then you haven't really invested in an asset. You've just paid one of the company's bills, and at the end of the day, you own nothing.
All right, red flag number 4. This is a classic business risk, especially for a company that's growing super fast. It's called market concentration. We're calling it the geographic bottleneck.
Right now, the whole operation, the sales, the free delivery, it's all focused on one single market, Harare. Now that's a great way to start, for sure, but it also means the entire business depends on the demand inside just one city. Everything hangs on that. And here's where that becomes a problem. See, every new partner that comes in helps increase the supply of pork, but the number of people who want to buy pork in Harare, well, that's not infinite. So if production starts to grow faster than demand, you end up with a surplus, a supply glut. And if the company has too much pork and can't sell it, they might be forced to do the one thing they promised not to, lower that guaranteed buyback price.
And that brings us to our 5th and final red flag. This one's a risk in any kind of farming, but when you have a lot of animals in one place, it gets much, much scarier. I'm talking about the risk of a biological disaster that could literally wipe out the entire investment in the blink of an eye.
Legally, they call this force majeure. It's basically an act of God clause. In farming, the nightmare scenario is a disease like African swine fever. It's incredibly contagious, almost always fatal for pigs, and it can tear through a farm and destroy everything in just a few weeks.
So this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If a disease like that hits the farm, who takes the hit financially? Is it the company? Is it the partner? You? Or is there an insurance company that covers it? If there isn't a clear, written answer to that question, you have to assume that the risk falls right back on the investor.
Okay, so we've gone through 5 major red flags. Now, the point of all this isn't to say don't invest. Not at all. The point is, don't invest blind. It's about giving yourself the tools to do your homework, to do your due diligence. Think of it as your investor seatbelt. And here are the steps you absolutely have to take. These are non-negotiable. 1. Demand a formal, written contract and have a lawyer look at it. 2. Make them spell out exactly what assets you own and give you the legal title. 3. Ask to see the insurance policies and verify they're real. And 4. Get that guaranteed buyback price locked into the contract in US dollars so there's absolutely no wiggle room.
Look, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple. Investing in agriculture is always going to be a bumpy ride. That's just how it is. But you would never get on a bus for a bumpy ride without putting on your seatbelt, would you? That solid contract, those clear answers, that is your seatbelt.
So I'll leave you with this one final question to ask yourself, not just with this opportunity, but with any investment. Is your money making you an investor, or is it just making you a passenger? Because an investor has rights, they have ownership, they have legal protection. A passenger, well, they're just along for the ride, hoping the driver knows where they're going. Before you hand over a single dollar, you need to be absolutely sure which one of those you are.